All right, Rob, I think we're now live on the Facebook page. I want to welcome everybody to another episode of Conversations with Commodores. And I've got my longtime buddy, Rob Chura, from the St. Louis area with me. Good afternoon or good evening, Rob. How you doing, my friend?
Good evening, Bernard. Good to see you.
You too. It's been a while. It has.
It
I've wanted
has.
to catch up with you for quite a while. You've done so many things in the years since we've parted ways that I just thought this would be a great space for us to come together and kind of catch up a little bit. And before we jump into our past, talk about what you're doing these days. What do you do professionally?
I teach. My primary job is I teach Russian at St. Louis University High School in St. Louis, Missouri, which that's where I'm from. That's not the high school that I went to. It's a Jesuit high school. I went to the rival Jesuit high school, the Smet Jesuit High, but it's definitely home. Been there the past 23 years. Um, Coached football there for the first 20. The past 3 years, I've been made the move to Division III football as a wide receivers coach at Washington University, which has been a neat, change of venue. Other than that, I've recently kind of taken on this role of director of global education at St. Louis U High. In all my time at SLU, that's what we call it for short. All my time at SLU, I've run exchange programs where I've taken my own students over to Russia in the winter and in the summer. With global ed being more of a thing, especially in private schools these days, we kind of made a commitment to expanding that. I've moved from just being in charge of those Russian programs that I started to being in charge of all of our global ed initiatives, whether it's the exchange students we bring on to the campus for a semester or a year, or, the international programs we send our kids over to our partnership schools. Um, that, kind of covers it. The language teaching, coaching football, and, more recently here being involved in the global ed world.
Excellent, excellent. Well, it
Yeah.
sounds like you found a real niche that's something that you enjoy. You're doing not only the academic aspect of it, but you still got your hand in football and have for many
Yeah.
years now. But coaching wide receivers, that's got to be a little bit of a change. I mean, from when I knew you, you were a field goal kicker. How did that evolve into the wide receivers coach? I
Yeah,
mean,
well, absolutely. I mean, I do. I should say I still do work with the kickers and the punters as well. But that's a much smaller portion of my job. Yeah, I mean, to be a coach at any level, you really gotta have a good understanding of both sides of the ball. And in high school, I played running back and defensive back. Just happened to, especially being a 5'4", 140 pound. Running back slash defensive back, I tend to make a little more of an impact as a place kicker than I did as a regular
sure.
position player. But I mean, I always loved the game and just all the ins and outs of it. And honestly, I was fortunate at Vanderbilt. I had a lot of time to sit back and kind of watch all that. With being a place kicker, you work your craft a little bit there, but then probably half a practice. And, I mean, this, we were just kind of hanging around watching. And I
That's
always
true.
had the thought that, I'd like to go into coaching someday. So I tried to absorb as much as I could. And then after I finished up at Vanderbilt, actually, I went to graduate school at University of Illinois, and I GA'd there for 2 years with the football program there. It wasn't you were only allowed to have one offensive and defensive coach at the time, so I wasn't one of the those spots, and those were real competitive. But I was just kind of a general GA in the program, and again, just another opportunity for me to kind of watch and learn and pick stuff up. So when the opportunity came to coach on the high school level, it was again a little bit of a learning process, but you pick up a lot, and it's been exciting. Working with the kids at WashU, it's very similar to Vanderbilt athletes. I mean, a very high, prestigious
Hey,
academic school. But
probably some
you get some.
cerebral kids.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of play to that strength. I think some. there's definitely a real steep learning curve, and those kids are able to do some pretty impressive things. And they're out there for the right reasons. It's Division III non-scholarship, so it's not like their tuition is dependent on them coming out each day. But they're great kids, and we got we're kind of a program on the cusp of that top 25 at the Division III level. We'll kind of get in for a week or two, and then drop back. We're in a pretty competitive conference. It's called the CCIW, which the national champion this year came from our conference. Yeah, it's been great, and love all the technical side of coaching receivers and offensive football in general.
Well, one of the coaches I bet you observe from time to time is with us this evening, Coach Gary Shepard. Good morning or good afternoon, Coach. Thanks for joining us. I know you knew Coach Shep back in the day, and he's here and says to tell you hello.
Absolutely, I remember Coach Shepard. Good to hear he's online tonight.
He's got a very successful steak restaurant in Tennessee, and I'm hoping he'll share the link with us in here so we can all go check it out next time we're in the neighborhood. Rob, let's go back to before you committed and came to play at Vanderbilt. Football wasn't your only sport. In fact, I know you hockey was probably a little more important to you at times. But when did you first pick up either a football or a hockey stick? When did you get it? Tell me about your sports origins.
So, hockey was really my thing for, the good part of my childhood and into when I got into high school. Started playing hockey at 5 and was kind of fortunate. I had 3 older brothers who were 6 and 7 years older than me. The Blues came to St. Louis about the time that they were, 3-4 years old. And it was a big deal, for us regionally. And so my brothers, even though my dad never played hockey, but my brothers got involved in it, and I just kind of tagged along as a kid. And it really fascinated me. And I started playing at 5. It was my favorite thing. I loved being on the ice, and again, there was a lot of excitement in the St. Louis community around some of these new rinks opening up, kind of similar to what I've seen here recently in Nashville, honestly, with the Predators and
Sure.
just the level of hockey that's developed down there. So and that was my favorite sport. I really I played baseball, played soccer, played basketball, kind of always had a thought in mind, when I get to high school, I want to play football, but hockey was really my main thing. And, throughout high school, still kept playing the sport, but, football had some, success there, and started getting recruited and thought, well, maybe this might be a little bit better opportunity. Again, being a littler guy, kind of saw that, maybe that scholarship to go kick footballs might be a better path than trying to make it as a right wing in a hockey world that
Sure.
Tends to be dominated by more northern territories than St. Louis was
Sure.
at the time.
Sure. Well, I got to ask, Rob, back in the 80s, there were a few well-known barefooted kickers. Franklin, Ersklavin were the two main ones that come to mind to me. How did you decide, or how did it evolve that you became a barefooted kicker? And
Sure.
June Jakes has just joined us, and I'm sure Ms. Jakes says hello. And thanks, Coach Shep, for putting the Edwards Steakhouse link on there. But talk to us. How did you get to become a barefooted kicker?
Well, it was really kind of out of necessity. My brother kicked at Notre Dame, and he and I kind of worked out together in the summer. And, and I was in high school every once in a while. I just would kind of mess around with it. You saw guys doing it and wondered, like, was there any advantage to it? So, I played around with it a little bit, didn't think it was anything I needed to do, but was comfortable doing it. And if you recall, after my freshman year at Vanderbilt, that was when they changed the rule where we had to start kicking off the ground. My first year at Vanderbilt, we could still kick off the 2-inch tee like you still can do in high school.
I hated those. And being one of your holders, I hated the tee. And I don't know how kickers feel about it. I'm going to ask you that. But that tee just was the bane of my existence being a holder. Yeah. But go ahead.
It does. It makes because you got to put it on a spot now, and if you don't hit that spot, you got a little bit more of a target, the bigger target there when you kick it off the ground. But anyway, that I knew that was going to be a big question mark. How guys transition from kicking off a 2-inch block to kicking off the ground, and again, I had played around with it a little bit, and there was a kind of an open competition going into spring, and I figured being able to elevate and make that adjustment as quickly as possible is probably going to help me out a little bit. So, one advantage it does give you when you don't have your shoe on is it really does allow you to elevate and get under the ball a little bit easier. So, from that standpoint, I thought it might be an easier way for me to make that transition. And again, it was something that it didn't bother me. After a while, you kind of get used to the sting and just felt okay, and so I continued with it. But, my last 2 years at Vanderbilt, I went back to kicking with a shoe on again. So I did it for about those 2 years when I felt like it would help me transition. And then after, as we got kind of to the end of the season, it did take a toll on, my foot as a whole. And I thought, I'm comfortable enough kicking off the ground. I think I can put the shoe back on. And so I finished up the last 2 years with the shoe back on.
I don't remember any issues with you having just wearing out that part of your foot more so than just having a tired leg by the end of the season after kicking thousands and thousands of times.
Yeah.
And I want to thank you for having a groomed foot, for a person being as intimately as close to your foot as anyone. Thank you for having a somewhat groomed foot during that time.
Well, I was always very considerate, wanting to make sure that you guys did such a big job for me. So that's the least I could do is make sure that you didn't have something horrible to look at.
I want to welcome O.J. Fleming, one of our buddies from Mid-State Tennessee in the Nashville area. Hey, O.J., thanks for joining us. And of course, Miss Jake says tell you hello. And we're enjoying this just as well. Rob, let's take it to you're getting recruited by Vanderbilt. Watson Brown is the head coach at the time. He was my coach. I'm a couple of years older than you. Who recruited you, and how did you ultimately make that decision? This is the school for me. I'm coming to Nashville.
George Warhop was the guy who recruited me, if you remember. And actually,
Coach Hop. Yep.
Been in touch with Coach Warhop at different times over the years. It's good to see he's still doing well. That helped a lot. Being recruited by a guy like Coach Warhop, he's definitely was really uniquely skilled as a recruiter. So that made it a really good fit. I had a couple of schools that I was looking at, and I kind of whittled it down to Vanderbilt, Stanford, and Michigan were kind of the three that I felt like if any of those comes through, I can't lose. It's all, great academics, great football, great locations. Vanderbilt was the one that kind of pushed the issue sooner than the others. And I came down for a camp, obviously, with Nashville being pretty close to St. Louis. Just everything kind of fell in place, and it just seemed like I'd be an idiot to pass this up. So, I recruited really early on. I committed, I should say, really early on, around October or so, and gave up my other visits that I had planned to some other places, just because I thought, I got what I want. Why mess around? So, yeah.
No, and at the time, we had Johnny Clark was on the roster, and I think he was the number one kicker.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe, were you in the same class, or was Jeff Owen a year ahead of you? I can't remember.
No, we were in the same class together. That was a unique situation that we had. There was three of us actually in that same class because David Lawrence came in as well. So
that's right, from Georgia.
Yeah, to get three David specialists in the recruiting class back then was pretty unusual. There was we kind of all came in together.
Yeah, now that I remember y'all being the same class, I couldn't remember Jeff being a local guy to Nashville. I couldn't remember if y'all were the same class. Well, you come in 89. From an academic standpoint, how was the transition from your high school to the academics at Vanderbilt?
Sure. Yeah. I think transition into college is, there's a lot of kind of feeling out and, sort of figuring out the lay of the land. I think, to the credit of the high school that I went to, Desmet Jesuit, I think they prepared me very well. I was able to hit the ground running, and I think the big thing in the college level is just finding something to study that you're passionate about and that you really care about. I majored in Russian and German, and foreign languages in general, linguistics, all that stuff has always been very fascinating to me. But those two languages in particular, to me, like to go to those classes, which probably sounds a little weird. Like it wasn't like going to school. I mean, I couldn't wait to get in there. So I think if you really find something that you've got a true interest in, regardless of how difficult the academics are, that's the big thing for anybody. As a teacher, I see that myself with my own students. I mean, no matter how hard you try to make it interesting, if that interest in there, it's just hard to really force yourself to excel at something that you're just kind of doing because you got to. So, there's some of the other requirements that you got to kind of gut it out and get through. There were some tougher classes here and there, but again, I think my high school experience prepared me well. So
That's great.
mm,
Had you gone to a state school, or not Vanderbilt, but a state school, you pretty much were a unicorn in that maybe uh, you played hockey, you were a barefooted field goal kicker, you majored in two different languages, and all of that packaged together on a Vanderbilt campus, you were pretty much you didn't really stand out as much. And I'm not belittling who you were or what you were
sure.
about,
Oh
but
no, no.
had you been at the dreaded school over in Knoxville, they wouldn't have known what to do with you. But
Uh,
coming to Vanderbilt, from an academic standpoint, it sounds like you transitioned pretty well, particularly somebody who was able to double major in two different pretty tough languages, but then also field goal kicking. And I don't remember you playing hockey the year or two we were together, but I know you ended up playing toward the latter part of your undergraduate, and I want to get to that in just a second. But
sure.
were you able to play at all during the any other time other than the last year or two you were at Vanderbilt during your years at Vanderbilt?
Yeah, no, it was really just that short couple months, really, and in the end, it was, probably. I mean, I'm glad that I got the opportunity to do it, but
Sure.
from a practical standpoint, it was probably I put myself at more risk than I needed to.
Sure.
Um, but I always felt like my hockey background really paid off for me as a kicker. I think skating so 9 months out of the year the way I did, it really developed my lower body strength in ways that I think gave me some advantages as a kicker. I mean, skating is so lower body specific. So when I did get the chance, like when I would come home to St. Louis in the summer, there were always a couple of summer hockey leagues that you could pay a couple bucks and play some games at like 11 o'clock at night when ice time was cheaper,
Right.
and it was, again, like, college kids or maybe like, seniors in high school. So, occasionally I would do that. Like, when you and I were playing together, I think that first summer that I came back to St. Louis, I played about a 10 game pickup season, during that summer, at a rink close by. But, other than that, really didn't get an opportunity until, that the Vanderbilt hockey club team started to get back into functioning, and just I saw a flyer on campus and called the guy's number, and we practiced a couple of times over at the Centennial Sportsplex there, behind the Tower Records, if you remember,
Oh
and
yeah.
got some uniforms together, and we played about 5, 6 games that year, and it was a blast. It was a lot of fun.
Did you get
But
to keep
then,
your Did you get to keep your jersey?
I still have it. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, you gotta send us a picture of that. I gotta see
I
that.
mean, it's so dry rotted and worn out that you probably, it's still like in the bottom of my hockey equipment bag. I've got when my mom moved out of her house, and we've all probably been there. Your parents move and they start passing on all those heirlooms that they keep from
Yeah.
your life. I got all my hockey equipment back, and I looked through there and found that jersey in there, and it's pretty bare bones, just like yellow with a black Vanderbilt screened across the front of it. But
Well, I'm gonna hold you to it. I gotta see a picture of you wearing it.
yeah, I'll see if I can find it. One that actually does it some justice. But um,
Well, Rob.
like I said, there was that one year, and then I kind of realized when Coach Donardo came in, it was basically in that period, like, after my third year at Vanderbilt, going into my fourth when, we transitioned from Coach Brown to Coach Donardo, and the team meetings, I could tell, like, I can't be committed to some other activity like this, especially one that could potentially get me hurt. So
Right,
I just kind of backed away and said, it's been fun, guys, but I think I have a bigger commitment here. So.
Yeah. Well, I want to welcome Stephanie Hubert. Hey, Stephanie, I hope Wally's watching with you. Thanks for tuning in. Rob, talk to us about, are there any transferable skills between hockey and field goal kicking? Anything that you use from one that helped you in the other?
I wouldn't say like specific like technique skills, but what I talked about before, I really do think, and my brother was another example of this as well. I mean, we all grew up playing hockey, and he kicked at Notre Dame, with for this, similar reasons. I really do think that the lower body development that hockey provides really gives you some advantages as a kicker, and just on a football level, the other part of it was just the physicality of the game. When I got to high school, like I said, I played defensive back and running back, as a regular position player. The contact that I came into there, freshman year, guys were kind of getting their bell rung, and you could see that the contact part intimidated some kids. And I always thought, the contact that you get in hockey when you get slammed into the boards by somebody, coming at you full speed, or maybe two people, it prepared me well for the, I thought this is nothing compared to what that is sometimes. So from that standpoint, it was good.
Let's move on to the football experience. And I don't know, I didn't get a chance to look, but at one point you either held or were close to the top in holding some kicking records in Vanderbilt history. I know you had a very memorable game against Navy. I want you to talk to us about that game. Was that in the 91 or the 92 season?
That was 92 season. 92 was really the one year that I, played as consistently as, I'd hoped, that where I, held down the kicking spots the entire season. So, Navy was obviously a high point, and it was it was a high point just from the standpoint too that I'd kind of injured myself that week in practice. I had a lower back strain, and I had a pretty poor performance the week before against Kentucky, so it was kind of feeling like my back was against the wall. My back's really bothered me, and I had kind of a clunker the week before, and certainly had some very accomplished backups that that could take that position over if I couldn't get the job done. A guy named Rob Giuliano, definitely was ready to go if I couldn't do it. So, and I can remember warming up thinking, I hope I'm able to answer the bell today. And it's just one of those where sometimes when you're feeling at your worst, lo and behold, things fall into place, and you end up having a real memorable game like that. So, the 51-yarder there that keeps me in the lower levels of that record book. Definitely not at the top. That was nice to get that one to go through. And then I hit a 44-yarder a little bit before that, like the drive before it, that I know I thought I hit real well. So, it was a good day, but like I said, because of the back stuff, I had to back off the kickoffs, and Rob Giuliano finished up the game. But my sister was there. She lives in the Washington D.C. area, so that was kind of neat to do it with my sister and brother-in-law there.
That's very cool with family
Yeah,
there. Very cool. And that was you guys. That was the last win of the season.
yeah,
Victories against Duke at home, at Ole Miss at home, and they were ranked in the top 25 at the time. And then in November, victories at Kentucky and at Navy were the four
yeah.
wins for the season. Um, Talk to us a little bit about during the years you were at Vanderbilt. What are some vivid good memories other than the Navy game? Was there certain practices, certain things Coach Bates made you do? What were some things that really you come back to every so often that put a smile on your face, that give you a chuckle?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's so many. I just remember that first, just kind of your introduction to the program, just kind of going through that first year and seeing what playing in the SEC is all about. I mean, there's um, such so many neat aspects of that. But one of the things I clearly remember is that first we opened up against Mississippi State that first year, and we at home, and just the atmosphere, and it was kind of one of these perfect early fall nights, and we ended up coming out on top and winning, which obviously made it that much more special. But just being on the sidelines for that season opener, and just getting to see that all for the first time was such a neat deal. Just playing in the places that we played in. It was when you play in the SEC, road games especially can really. I think at times it kind of would pump us up. I mean, you can probably speak to this too. Just the huge crowds and the venues that we played in. Just the electricity was always really something special to be a part of. So from the football standpoint, there's that part. And just Vanderbilt's a special place. There's every time I go back on campus, make a visit to Nashville for whatever reason. Actually, I work the Vanderbilt football camp in the summer. As a guest coach. We obviously recruit some of the same type of kids, academic kids. So Coach Mason's nice enough to allow some of us guest coaches to come and work at the camp. Just you walk around and you just kind of remember just the neat things that you did there, and just the atmosphere of the place. Where like you talked about before, my interests in some things that are a little diverse academically. At some places that might be kind of looked at, weird. That Vanderbilt, that was, you're around people, everybody's like that, and you learn from everybody else, and just the experiences with your teammates, but just the rest of the Vanderbilt student body. It's and the professors, and just all the people associated with that place. It's
Pretty
I
special
don't know
place,
anyone
isn't it?
who leaves Nashville with a bad experience. So
When you go back, or when you were a guest coach, did you happen to walk around campus, did you live in Branscombe back in the day as a freshman?
I did, yeah. I mean, like I said, and I've been on campus a couple other times in Coach Franklin in their era. As a high school coach, we came down and met with the staff, and went over, just kind of looked at some of their scheme and things like that. But that's what I'm talking about. Like when I got a free minute from things like that, you kind of wander around. I'm sure you've done the same, and the memories come back, and it's one of the things that's kind of hard to see is that the towers are no longer there.
It's there's so many new buildings. I hate to sound like an
Mhm.
old dude, but holy cow. It's some of the buildings we didn't even have at the time. That's the
Mhm.
student union, et cetera. But several years ago, my younger daughter, who played lacrosse in college, went to a Vanderbilt lacrosse camp, and I dropped her and the teammates off, and it was at Branscombe, so I had to go upstairs and see what it looked like.
Yeah.
and it's the same. Nothing had changed, maybe extra layers
Yeah.
of paint, but that's about it. And they're
Yeah.
like, "You lived here?" And I was like,
Hmm.
"Yeah, that's what it was." But Rob, I want to say hey to Steve Law. Slaw Dog is on
Uh-huh.
with us. Good to see you, Steve. Thanks for
Yeah.
tuning in for a minute or two. Um, Rob, let's come forward with your students at your high school who aren't necessarily athletes or going on that track, but Vanderbilt is in their radar. And it sounds like that your school is a real collegiate oriented school,
Sure.
so you must have kids who are very interested, if not going to Vanderbilt, at least applying there. How
Hmm.
is it from their experience now applying, and I don't know if you're involved in any of that, versus what your experience was like, 30 years ago.
Sure, yeah. Well, with us being scholarship athletes, we went through a little bit different
Yeah.
process. But yeah, well, it's interesting. All the kids that I teach Russian, I teach them for all 4 years. So a lot of times when they're seniors, they'll ask me to write letters of rec for them because I've had that depth of experience. I've known them for 4 years. I mean, it makes sense. And I mean, I've had so many Vanderbilt requests over the years, and the kids know that that's where I went to school. So I think, a lot of times they'll maybe put that on there as one of their schools that they're applying to just because of that association. So there's that point of it. But my wife actually works at the high school as well, and she's in the counseling department, the college counseling department, as well as like the personal counselors. And so she kind of, sees the places that our kids apply to, and who gets in and to where and so forth. And that's been one of the things that I think everybody notices is just how hard it is, to get into Vanderbilt. And that's a testament to the talent and the quality of the student that are coming in there. I wouldn't know what the numbers were like in our era, but my daughter will kind of shake her head at me at times and say, you know, kicking a football was what got you in that place, huh? And you kind of say,
It's as
well,
if,
there were some other
Rob,
things too, but certainly it helped.
same conversations with my daughters back several years ago. How
Yeah.
did you get into Vanderbilt?
Uh-huh.
Well, I
Well,
had a
yeah.
pretty decent right arm that somebody liked.
Uh-huh.
But our valedictorian at our high school, it's a private collegiate oriented school here in town,
Yeah.
didn't get in a few years
Hmm.
ago. And
Yeah.
I think part of it is the numbers game when so many kids from one high school or one part of town or zip code applies. I don't know how all that it happens, but it's so uh, unbelievably competitive these
Yeah.
days. And I've been on the local area interview. I do interviews for Vanderbilt for kids wanting to apply. They're so nervous. They're so jacked up about this whole process that, and going back to you committing back in October or the fall during your senior year, I committed in January right after my visit, and
Hmm.
all of the pressures just kind of went
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
And now kids are committing so much earlier in the
Sure.
process.
Yeah.
And not to, this could be a whole nother subject for another day. I really hope the NCAA really clamps down on when you can commit. But
Hmm.
your senior year is so pressure filled. It's your last go around. It really is a relief, I think, to some student athletes or non-athletes who just go ahead and make that decision early in their senior year. And I don't know if you see this with your students, but I could always tell amongst my daughter's friends who had already made their decision because they were enjoying life so much
Yeah.
more than the other kids who were sweating it out until May 1st or whatever their deadline was.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's definitely the trend. And like I said, I think there's a lot of those, elite, more prestigious schools. They just, their selectivity level has really, been raised over the past couple of decades, and it's like I said, it definitely, raises the profile of school, and it's all exciting stuff to see, but it's a hard place to get in the front door.
But once you're in, man, you got to stay there.
But
You
yeah,
got to keep.
and
Uh,
that's yeah. Once you're there, it's a great 4 years.
or for some 5 or 6, depending. Guys, if you're just joining us or if you watch this later on, I'm with Rob Chura. Rob was field goal kicker at Vanderbilt back in the late 80s, early 90s. He and I overlapped. Will Pryor just came on. Hey, Will, good to see you,
Chicken
bud.
wings.
Will, yep, he
Hmm.
does some great things down in Louisiana, and he's all over the place, and hope to get to see him again soon. Rob, we're almost at the end of our conversation, and I appreciate your few minutes, but I want to take you back. I got a couple of questions for you. Tell me
Sure.
some of your favorite places you used to visit. Now, you don't have to talk about what you did when you were there, but I want you to name some of your favorite places on campus, and it could be a pizza place, bar, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Where'd you like to go during the time that you were there that brings you back to that time period?
Well, yeah, I mean, there were obviously, we had Banditos there across the street that, no, that's like a flower shop now or something, or it might have even been torn down completely, but, that was kind of our turf there across from, Carmichael Towers too. And then kind of drifted into the Dickie Magruder's world, if you remember that, the little pillbox there behind the, Wendy's on, Jess Neely Avenue there.
Yeah.
Or whatever that's, yeah, I think it's Chess Neely, isn't it? But so those were, some, typical kind of college hangouts. The one place that I go back to all the time, and some people know about, some people don't, is Hog Heaven.
I
It's
don't know
behind the
Hog Heaven.
McDonald's. It's behind the McDonald's there, right across the street.
Okay.
It's just a little small building with a kind of a screened-in porch front, but I love the barbecue there, and that was just one of those places that I stumbled across. Probably
Sure.
walking back from practice, I just kind of noticed it there. And when I go through town, whether it's me by myself or with my kids, everybody knows that I'm going to stop off at Hog Heaven, and I
I know
actually,
where it is.
my
It's
kids
right
joke
across.
about that I have, T-shirts from all the
Yeah.
barbecue places I go to. So, uh,
Is that place across the street from Centennial Park?
yeah, it's right there on
Okay,
the edge of Centennial Park.
I know where it is. I know where it is.
Yeah,
How about Rotiers near the Eckards? You remember
definitely.
Rotiers?
When I came down with my former head coach on the high school level, and we visited with Coach Franklin's staff, he said, like, hey, you're the guy that knows the territory here. Where are we going to go? And Rotiers was definitely one of our visits while we were there.
We just been this past fall. I went to a ball game and took the kids, and we went to Rotiers was one of our stops. But so many things have changed over
Yeah,
the years. There's hotels, there's all this. Banditos is, I think, a florist shop now. I
yeah.
actually found a picture where I was wearing that Banditos across the street, Vanderbilt across the street from Banditos T-shirt. But
Uh-huh.
Rob, let me wrap it up with one last question for you. If you hear music on the radio or a movie or you see or read a book or something like that, give me something that takes you back in time. Like for me, it's always hearing REM. Anything by REM takes me back to
Mhm.
my freshman hall. That just
Definitely.
they were huge. Who
Uh-huh.
takes you back? What memory jogs you? And you may be with the kids and say, "Oh man, that song was huge back in the day." Give me
Yeah,
something that takes you there.
yeah. Well, actually, one that's kind of weird. The Trisha Yearwood song, "She's in Love with the Boy." That was always, I'm sure nowadays there's a little bit more variety to the warm up track that they play. But my last year, that was always the first song that they played at home when we came out of the locker room. And, specialists would always go out first ananyway. So
Yeah.
anytime that comes on, and we usually come out and there was nothing playing. And then about 2-3 minutes into our little kind of mini warm up there, they'd
Who
start
was in
that
charge
warm
of
up.
who was in charge of music at the time? Any idea?
I don't know, but it's just there's always that association because you come out there, you start hitting the first couple balls, and
Yeah.
then I always remember that as being the first thing that came on. So
Well,
that's
Ju-
one of those
Julie
memories.
Wyatt, Luke Wyatt have just joined us. And Luke or Julie, if you're watching, who was in charge of music back then? I mean, why isn't there some
Might have been Bill
AC/DC
Kelly.
something? Huh?
Might have been Bill Kelly.
It might have been Kelly, but anyway, Rob, I could keep talking to you forever. Thanks for a trip down memory lane. Thank you for sharing some of your story. And Bud, I hope to see you when I come up to St. Louis in a couple of months.
Absolutely. That's, when we caught up, I mean, first, just thank you for having me and thank you for doing this. I think this is kind of a neat deal for all of us to catch up a little bit, as we talked about, just it's always good to, you think, like, what's that guy up to? So definitely we'll tune in and kind of see who your next guests are. But yeah, it's great talking with you. And when you're in St. Louis for your conference, definitely we'll have to meet up.
I'm looking forward to it. Guys, this will conclude another episode of Conversations with Commodores. Luke says the marketing department, whatever that was or whoever that was in charge of the music. Well, they should have been fired a long time ago. Guys, this will do it for tonight. Rob, thank you again, bud, and I hope our paths cross again real soon. Guys, next week we're going to have another Conversations with Commodores, and I'm not going to give it away just yet, but just pay attention. Take care.
All right. See ya. Thanks.